Hello, welcome to the Planet Premier League podcast. I'm Mark Chapman. Coming up on this pod, we'll look at Arsenal's role in the title race. Are they already in trouble, losing at Bournemouth at the weekend? Another man sent off. They have Liverpool at home this Sunday. We'll also talk Brighton and their great early season form, and particularly the form of Danny Welbeck. With us, as ever, former Manchester City and Real Salt Lake defender Nedum Onuoha. Plus Statman Dave, who has all the stats and the numbers ahead of each Premier League weekend. And we're delighted to say, by former Brighton and Chelsea head coach, boss, manager, Graham Potter. Actually, on that, what did you when you started, right, in Östersunds, were you a manager? And over the course of your career, do you then morph into a head coach?
I don't know whether I morphed into it, but I started off as a manager because that's the requirement. That was the requirement in Östersund. And then I think once I came back to the UK, I think my role was head coach at Swansea, and then it was at Brighton. So, I mean, to me, I don't think there's too much difference. I think it's just a little bit of wording. The key thing is, do you understand the structure of the club, and does it make sense, and is everybody clear in what they're meant to do and the roles and responsibilities? And then in that case, it doesn't really matter whether you're a manager or a head coach.
And in regards to that then, personality-wise, are you Gaffer or are you Graham or are you Mr. Potter? Like, who are you to those players?
Well, in Sweden for 7 years, I was Graham because they didn't have the terminology Gaffer.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, I would say it's a flatter organisation in terms of hierarchy. It's not quite the same, boss and Mister and all that sort of stuff that we have maybe further down in Southern Europe. And then once you move into the UK, you just Gaffer again, and then everybody's just getting used to that. I mean, that's what they call me to my face, by the way. Yeah. There's a lot of other words that they can use behind my back. That's for sure.
It is weird, isn't it? I mean, I'm not sure, Nedum, I can think of another industry where you refer to your manager with an actual title. I mean, any of my bosses at work, I just call by the first name. I'd find it very weird to start calling someone boss or gaffer or whatever.
I suppose it's within football traditionally, like it's that hierarchy, isn't it? It's like it's set. Like you can't say my first name. You know what I mean? It's the same way, like for referees and stuff, they might just say your surname, or like you're in school, you are your surname, you're not your first name until you get to like sixth form. Then all of a sudden, everyone realizes, oh, you've got a first name. That's good for you. I'll be honest, like this might be a bit of a hot take. I never used to like saying gaffer. I never used to like it. I used to have to say it, but I never liked it. I'll be honest.
It was weird for me because I'd used to, obviously, as a player, calling the gaffer, and then all of a sudden the players are calling me Graham. And I'm going, I'm trying to, my ego's kicking in, and I'm going, are they just grading me off here, or are they disrespecting me, or whatever? And it's like, no, it's just what it is.
That is very Scandinavian, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Graham anyway. Do you know what I mean? As a name, so to be called it every day, I think I'd rather have Gaffer.
Has that been a problem over the years for you?
It's not been a problem.
If you're not a fan of your own name.
we had a guy called a player called Mundy Samuel. His name was Mundy Samuel, and he wanted to change it to Samuel. It's just Samuel. I was going, well, if I had a name called Mundy Samuel, I'd want to call myself Mundy Samuel. My name's Graham Potter. I really want to try and change that
name. When you first started at Östersund, is there, because at that stage, I suppose you would have been similar in age to a lot of the players as well, and there are lots of managers, particularly managers that go from playing to say player manager, that find the first few months difficult to put distance between themselves and the players. Was that an issue early in your career?
I think it probably was when I was at the university, in the university sector, when I was coaching the students there, because I'm even younger then. And and I hadn't learned enough about myself to maybe distance myself or play the role in the right way, and to understand what I had to do, how I could communicate, etc., etc. So you're trying to find your way. It's like anything in any walk of life. And you guys are starting out in this doing media, you just find your way, you're learning, you're trying to make, you'll make mistakes. You hope you're not, in a situation where you're making too many mistakes too much, because that's a problem for you. But in the right step, you understand communication and methodology and all those things are really important in a coaching perspective.
In terms of going to Sweden, how was the language barrier at the start? Obviously going there, did you speak any Swedish?
I didn't when I started. No, and it was we had probably the first. In fact, throughout my time there, it was 50% foreign players when it was Sweden. So you've got the challenge of the Swedes are brilliant at speaking English, so they want to practice speaking English with you. So even when you're learning, you're coming up with this horrendous broken Swedish that they just look at you and they just, let's just not waste our time here. Let me speak English. So you've got that to deal with, and then you've got the fact that the club is actually an English-speaking club. So unless you probably either go to school and commit some time outside of your work to actually study and learn Swedish, it was quite difficult. I got there in the end to the point where I could do an interview and answer stuff, but I was never, I don't think I was necessarily fluent in terms of like properly communicating. And there's always a thing when you go abroad, I think, that you can, even when you speak the language, speaking to people that are really fluent, they were sort of saying, yeah, but you just lose the nuance of the language, which is you, and you just don't feel that you're 100% authentic you. So there's a bit of that as well, which is also another challenge that we have.
I mean, you talked about coaching the footballers at university, which was at Hull University. So how did you find the language barrier in Hull?
My wife's from York, so I dealt with it okay, but it was a struggle, to be honest.
Just to explain before I get a whole load of abuse from Hull, I went to Hull University as well.
Here we go.
So you can, a great place. And to be honest, Graham, as I've said many times, if you'd coached 15 years earlier than when you did at Hull University, maybe I could have been a professional. I don't know. Maybe I'd have benefited from your expertise.
Or maybe I wouldn't have been a coach.
I think that's more likely. Nedum, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say it's amazing as well, actually, having had the chance to play a few teams from outside of the UK. Like, a lot of them speak English, There was a point in pre-season for QPR in 2014, we were playing Besiktas. I forget where we were. And Slaven Bilic was manager, and all the players were communicating in English to each other. Surprisingly, the English was better on their team than some of the people from England on our team at QPR. And to just put one final point on that, like Graham's example of trying to speak Swedish to people who want to speak English to him. When I was at QPR again, there was a really top guy, Esteban Granero. He'd just come from Real Madrid. Obviously got flight to Heathrow, ended up at QPR. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but what a lovely, lovely fella. And I was trying to work on my Spanish with him, and he was trying to work on his English with me. Somehow we ended up becoming friends, but I don't think neither of us had a clue what the other person was trying to say. But truly remarkable situation. What a brilliant fellow there.
But the language side of it becomes more and more important, Graham, doesn't it? I mean, given the nature of dressing rooms now, and if you can communicate to some of your players in their own language, doesn't it half make life easier?
No, for sure. And I think when you talk about coaching as well, in the Premier League, squads are just multinational. So the more you can communicate in as close to their language as possible, that's going to be beneficial to you. I think even if you want to think about English coaches working abroad, if you can't speak the language, it's nigh on impossible. So, I was thinking about it today. Wonder whether YTS scheme, whether it's still YTS schemes, apprentice schemes, whatever youth development schemes can actually focus on making all players learn a language, because it's something that as English we're not brilliant at. I think it stops us working abroad. I think it stops us going out into Europe. If there's some way that football could maybe change that and implement that, I think that'd be quite useful.
Graham Potter alongside Nedum Onuoha and Statman on this pod. We'll talk Arsenal-Liverpool in just a moment. Are you enjoying your time away, Graham, as we just do a little bit on you before we get to Arsenal-Liverpool? Do you feel relaxed, liberated, ready to go again?
Yeah, I do. All those things. I think the time I've had has been, amazing. I had 12, 13 years of non-stop football coaching, managing. So from the 4th tier in Swedish football to last 8 in the Champions League with Chelsea. So that doesn't come for free in terms of how much you have to devote and how much you have to sacrifice for that, especially when you've got a young family. So to be able to have the time to spend with them, to reconnect with them, to sort of get a bit of energy and reflect and look back on the 12 years and think, okay, what went well and what can I improve and what do I need to do and what do I want the next 12 years to look like? It was, don't get me wrong, I didn't want it to happen, but when it does happen, you have to try and take the positives and look at it as a bit of a gift and say, okay, look, what does the next stage, sort of bring and what's it look like and how do I want it to look? And now I'm I'm enjoying doing things like this. Is something I never really did, because when you're a football manager, you haven't got time to do stuff like this, and I quite like to experience new things. So that's been good to be able to do that. And at the same time, you give yourself a chance to watch the madness and from afar, and you get a perspective, and then you look back, and I can honestly say I'm more confident in my own ability now than I was before I went to Chelsea or before I went to Brighton. So the process has been good.
So, two parts really. You say you're enjoying time with your kids and stuff. Are your kids ready for you to go back into full-time management? And
My wife is.
yeah, also. And secondly, then, having spent time away from the game and as a manager who is, in the grand scheme of things, a young manager, have you got in your mind which things you think you need to do differently the next time, or are you very similar to how you were before you got your last job?
No, I think I'm pretty similar. To be honest, part of the reflections were that I can be proud of what I've achieved in my career. Like I said, for 12 years to have that stage and that development, I think it's pretty impressive. And I don't like to talk about that because it's that's part of my life and my journey. And I did it with lots of other people, so it wasn't just me. But nevertheless, to go on that journey was pretty cool. And obviously it didn't end how I wanted it to end in terms of what happened at Chelsea. And there are lots of factors, and a part of the reflection process is to go, okay, you can beat yourself up on the one hand because you made this mistake or that mistake or this mistake or that mistake, but also you've got to also look at the context that you're working in and try to find some balance between, taking responsibility yourself and learning and improving, and also sometimes in life things are just out of your control, and you have to accept that and make the most of the experience and come back stronger. I mean, in football we want to win, and it's about winning, and we love that feeling. But actually, the defeats and the setbacks and those things are how you can improve as well. So at the time it's painful. At the time it's you have to deal with it. But I'm 100% sure that once you come through it, you're a better person and a better coach for it.
Obviously, we talk about different clubs and different jobs and expectations of different clubs and what comes with them. The night you accepted Chelsea and went home and knew you were going to be Chelsea manager, did that feel different to any other job you'd accepted?
Well, in some ways yes, in some ways no. I think whenever I took a job, there was always a feeling of, okay, I'm taking a step up here. When I left Foster Son to go to Swansea, it was like, oh, this is a step up. There's Wilfred Bonney in the dressing room. There's the Awood. These players have come from Man City. They've played in the Premier League, so there's a step up there. And then you go from Swansea to Brighton, so again there's a step up there. And okay, you're conscious of it, you're aware of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. Otherwise, I don't think you're human. Otherwise, and then the step up again to Chelsea. I mean, it's a big step, but at the same time, I think all the steps I've taken have been big and in their own way, and you have confidence that you can take them.
I think from a perspective of that learning, Graham, is there anything tactically that you've seen around Europe or, from reviewing yourself in a way that you think that might be something you want to bring in next time?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things. I think the game, there's always interesting things going on in the game. And I think somebody said, there's nothing original really. I don't think. I think we all think that we've got this great idea, and we're these sort of creative geniuses, but all we're doing is nicking it from somebody else, pretty much. And we're seeing, okay, how
Dave works in a very similar way, Graham. I'm finding
that is terrible.
Dave, you're the whipping boy on this show. I've only
you need to take it, Graham, because unfortunately, I play football with Nedum, so if I say anything bad about him, he's going to 2-foot me in the next game.
Listen, that would never be me, my friend. But Chappers, you know what he's doing here? This is brilliant, because I'm trying to find some time to sit down with Dave and go through something tactically, because I think Dave believes he's found the answer to breaking teams down. And this is Dave who I've seen him play and he's getting better. Credit where it's due, Dave. You are getting better, but there is a whole other side to football which would make things a bit more tricky. And I'm going to try and deliver that to you. Right. And Graham has respectfully answered your question, but in the end, you'll see, Dave, what you think you want is a long way from what I believe will actually happen within football. But until you can prove otherwise.
It's not what I think is going to happen. It's just I've gone back to that, and that is very, very effective. So me and Nedum were just talking about Hansi Flick. Obviously, his Bayern Munich team was so dominant. What did it win? 6 trophies in one season. Hansi Flick's Barcelona are super interesting, and they're bringing back kind of like trends that we've previously seen. And as you mentioned there, Graham, like these things just reflect on each other, right? You read inverting the pyramid from Jonathan Wilson. These ideas have already happened, and they just get repurposed. But it's in terms of using, for example, we see a lot of midfielders in the Premier League moving into the advanced areas, kind of the 3-8 concept. And Hansi Flick's kind of gone back to the idea of a wide forward moving inside, and that being the constant theme within it. And it just feels at the moment like that's a stage that might come back again because it just looks so natural in and out of possession.
Yeah, we've gone through where everyone's playing inverted wrong side players on the wings, for example, and gone away from the same side foot to cross. You can see that coming back. Just how everybody, well, not everybody. I think certain coaches come in, certain people come into the game and influence football. I think you look at somebody like Roberto De Zerbi, for example, on how he's built up from goal kicks and then that influences people waiting on the ball a little bit more. But whereas before it was maybe about ball speed and moving the ball quickly and then driving space as maybe centre backs. Centre backs now are sort of standing on the ball a little bit more, waiting for pressure, bringing pressure out, and then finding the space behind the pressure. So there's always things that just evolve, but the game is still the game, and you've still got to think about, okay, can my players do this? It's not, as a coach, it's not about you going, okay, I've seen this fancy idea on the internet and I want to incorporate that. It's about, well, is it good for my players? Does it make sense for my players? And can they execute it and do it? I think that's always the key.
I think he was talking about you there, Dave, by the way, when he said he's seen it on the internet. But, I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
One of the things I keep saying to you, Nedum, obviously the inverted fullback is a great role and it really overloads the central area. But you have to be a certain type of player, like you're saying, Graham, to fully get the best out of that. Like, we all saw Joao Cancelo do it so well for Pep Guardiola, but he is so unique in how he plays. And I think that's a really interesting point because we've seen too many managers try that where it might not work out as well as it could do just playing natural.
Was that a genuinely new idea, Graham? We talk about tactics being copied and so, everything comes back round, and as Dave's mentioned, inverting the pyramid and going back to the Hungarian team in the 1950s or whatever it may be. Was that fullback coming into midfield a genuinely new idea?
I don't know. I don't know historically whether that's a new idea, but I think
it felt different.
I know Pep used to. I think Pep did it at Bayern Munich quite a bit because he had wingers and wanting to dominate the centre. And again, I think whatever you do, it's back to that. It has to make sense. If I watched Chelsea's last two games, for example, I thought they looked better against Liverpool than they did against Nottingham Forest, and part of that was they had two central midfield players in the holding positions rather than trying to put Malo Gusto in there, who probably that isn't his super strength to receive it in tight spaces in the central midfield area, the bodies around him. Actually, they went down a route of, okay, well, let's push him into the half space in a more advanced position because he's got the physicality to do that. So again, the idea stays the same, but the players' attributes and whether it fits and makes sense for them is always the bit. How original it is, I think. I only know that my bad ideas are original because they're the only ones that I've thought about.
I feel like most really good managers, they do things to try and solve a problem and to create opportunity. So I think at times we'll see it on TV or whatever, or hear it discussed online, but we won't get to hear the why they're doing it. And if it's the fullback coming into midfield, maybe it's because they want to have, say, more people ahead of the ball, but then defend in a certain way. They want to try and keep possession to limit the other team's potential and so on. And to talk about unoriginal ideas and alike. So a defender going into midfield, like I saw it years ago. I've seen Roberto Martinez, I think, tried to do it with Everton, Seamus Coleman coming a bit to the side. But here's one for you, Ian Holloway, shout out to him. Such a unique individual. And he's got this really brilliant mind in a supremely eccentric exterior. Like you're thinking, is he okay? Is he okay? But there was a game we were going to go and play. I think it was against Reading when we were at QPR. I think it was in the Championship, and he had two tactics boards out when he was naming the team. Lifted up the sheet on the first one, and we were playing like a 3-4-3 basically. And then he was talking through it, and he said, "All right, that's just in defence. And when we attack, the centre of the three of the back went into midfield and was playing alongside our six, and it was just like a normal thing. And he did this in 2017, and the room was like, this guy talking about, he's lost his mind. Defender in midfield, that'll be ridiculous. Then step forward a few other guys and a few Guardiola moments, and it's like he did that to try and solve a problem that we had. with a player who we knew was capable of doing it. And I think at times on the weekend, if we see a player not necessarily doing a role well, I don't think the managers just thrust it upon them now, and they've seen something from that player and they're training through it to be able to do it. And John Stones himself admits that when he was initially put into midfield, he was a bit taken aback and it took him a while to get used to it. But from when he did, like that was Guardiola's vision, wasn't it? And the coaching around him.
Have you felt then, Graham, as you've progressed, and bearing in mind this is relevant over the last couple of weeks with what's happened with England, do you feel a responsibility the higher up you go as a standard bearer for English coaches? And I throw that in with you, Eddie Howe, Sean Dyche, Gary O'Neill, because there aren't that many of you who have operated at Premier League level. Do you feel that, or can you not worry about that?
No, I think everyone's got their own choices to make. But for me, I've got 2 9-year-olds, so I see exactly what happens on a Sunday morning, whatever time it is. People just copy what they see at the highest level. So I think we have a responsibility to the game for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're at the top end and you're losing or whatever else, your fans don't really care about the bigger picture. But I think as a coach, you've got to put your mark in the ground somewhere and go, okay, what do I stand for here? What are my values? What do I believe in? And I think for me, it's always been about how you represent yourself within the game, because you've got to represent your club. And I think it also helps your players as well. Because if you're able to be consistent, if you're able to be calm and not blame other people and not push the responsibility somewhere else, then there's more chance that they will do the same. As soon as you start to blame everybody and have a go at the referee, and it makes it okay. Well, if the manager's doing that, then the players can do that as well, and then all of a sudden you've got a lack of discipline going on. And coaching, if you analyse coaching in football, I suppose football's about emotion, but it is for the players, because you don't want them to think, you don't want them to be consciously thinking on the pitch. They need to be, stimulus response. So it has to be emotion for them to a certain extent. You don't want it to be thinking, and for fans, it absolutely is. But for coaches, it's about, you've got to be cognitive. You've got to be able to think. You've got to be able to make decisions, and therefore controlling your emotions and being in a state where you can make those decisions and make those interactions is actually really important for you as a coach. And I suppose it's how you manage your own state. And like I said, I can't say anybody what they should or shouldn't do. But for me, it was always about, okay, how can I be respectful for the game, conduct myself as well as I can to enable me to be the best coach that I can be, but also to do all the other things that I've just mentioned.
But then for other English coaches to get opportunities with the bigger clubs, you're still one of the very few ones who got an opportunity as an English coach or even a British coach at a top 6 club.
Yeah, and I think there's a few things to consider. I mean, the fact that I had 7 years abroad probably helped me. My academic background, maybe at some stage, I mean, speaking to Tony Bloom, that was one of the things that he was sort of impressed with, or gave him confidence that he could employ me from Swansea. Because don't forget, when I was employed from Swansea, it was a day after I'd spoke to my agent, who said, "Look, you're not going to get a Premier League job unless you get promoted, into the Premier League." And then a day later, I have a phone call from Tony Bloom, who's looking past the 10th position in the table, because he can see the data and he can see my performance as a coach over a number of years, and he's also put that together with some other information, which is okay. He's also done a master's degree, etc., etc. So all of a sudden he makes a smart decision, and he does that. But that's not how football is. Football looks at whether you win or lose, and if you win, you're good, and if you lose, you're not very good. That's generally what it is. It's quite a binary measurement. And I suppose back to your point is there a pathway? I hate the word pathway, but is there coaches in the EFL being successful, and do teams in the Premier League look at that and go, okay, yeah, that's a good barometer for us to employ? At the moment, it doesn't seem that way, and there'll be different reasons for that. Maybe if you're managing an EFL team, it's a fairly English-based side, and then you go into the Premier League and it's more multinational. Things about playing style, things about it's a challenge for sure.
Well, you talk about pathway and you talk about opportunities. You talk about what people look at and data and so on and so forth. I have to ask you this: did England talk to you?
Well, like I said a few weeks ago, I've been out of work for 18 months, and I've had conversations with quite a few people, but I don't want to get in a sort of a place where I'm confirming or denying anything, because I don't think that's fair for anybody. I think that with regard to that, I think they've made a really good appointment for a coach that is obviously successful, has won lots of things, and I think if that's the strategy and if that's the criteria, then it's a fantastic appointment, because Thomas's record is brilliant, and he's won the Champions League, and absolutely, I think that there are obviously other things to consider in terms of, do I think that an English coach can win the World Cup and or a major trophy? Yes, absolutely, I do. I think you look at the previous winners. The Spanish coach, I don't think, was a Champions League winning coach. I don't think the Argentinian coach was a Champions League winning coach. If you look at the last European coach to win outside of Europe the World Cup, Joachim Low, his career was one of a coach. So, but at the same time, I understand if that's the criteria, and it feels like that was the movement towards, okay, we need a winning coach, a top coach that can help these top players, then Thomas is a fantastic coach and a great appointment.
I'm struggling to find who these 10 people were that apparently the FA spoke to. Nedum, did they talk to you?
No, maybe it was Dave.
No, we already asked this question on the radio, Nedum, and unfortunately, no, not for me.
I mean, no, it would be a hell of a story if you were on the 10, Dave. I mean, that would be the headline. Despite having Graham on, that would be the headline from this podcast. The final thing on managers, and this comes from Thomas Frank, who was on another podcast that I do this week, talking about how if he took the Manchester United job, for example, his life wouldn't necessarily be happier, was kind of what he came out with when talking about that. And I actually had Thomas on the Monday Night Club on 5 Live, Graham, when you were really, under the cosh at Chelsea. And I know you know Thomas quite well, don't you? And he was really feeling for you in that situation and those pressures, which the individual happiness sometimes can be very much underestimated, I think. And I look at Thomas, everything that he's got at Brentford and his family and so on and so forth, and that balance of challenging yourself professionally and life happiness. I'm not sure they necessarily go together.
No, and I think it's happiness is a tricky word to sort of define and get your head around. I mean, firstly, I would say that we make our choices. We're all well paid, so nobody should feel sorry for us. That's for sure. And you go into these positions, and you're gonna get stress. And if it was easy, maybe the salary wouldn't be quite so high. It's as simple as that. So, but I think there's a bit about, is it about happiness? Do you want to find happiness? Do you want to find meaning? Do you want to find something that you believe in? Do you want to find something that you can relate to? I think they're the questions you have to ask. But quality of life outside. My wife will say, "Look, it's been nice having you around because you're actually you are present." Whereas for the last 5 years, you've been here, but you're like some zombie. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about some team or some formation or some idea. And like I said, I don't want any sympathy for that. That's the choice and that's our path. But I think we're all, as human beings, we've all got to find a way that goes, okay, we need to get all our bits of our life in balance, and does it all feel okay to us? Because as soon as it goes the other way, it's not so good.
Let's move on to this weekend then. Should Mikel Arteta be a little bit worried, Nedum, about where Arsenal are at, given suspensions and injuries ahead of Liverpool this weekend?
Should he be worried? I do not think so. I believe, considering they're in, say, third position at this moment in time, 4 points off top after receiving criticism, people saying there's discipline issues and so on. I think he understands the importance of the start of the season, but I think he understands more so the way that they could potentially finish it. I think throughout the year, there will be ups and downs, and maybe this is relatively their down. And if this is where they are with that down, I wouldn't be too concerned. I think the disappointment after losing to Bournemouth is going to be big. But I think, in my opinion, the really good sides, the good players, good managers, and just good collective, good clubs, I always fancy them after a defeat. And I think the fact that they're going to face a test against Liverpool, and weirdly, at home, they'll feel possibly a bit like an underdog. I think that suits who they want to be in this particular moment, in my opinion. I think the crowd will be well up for it. I think the players will as well. And if they do manage to win that game, then it's the boost that they probably didn't think they did need at this time, but a boost that would certainly come. And the belief would be there 100%, because with a win, there'd be 1 point behind Liverpool, the team who, under Slot has had a record-breaking start. Is it 10 wins out of 11 since he's taken over? It's staggering. So I don't think he should be worried. I think he still believes in his side. I think with Saliba being out, yes, it causes an issue, but I think for anyone that's watched Arsenal this year, I think they know they've got enough defenders back there to be able to make some changes anyway. So I'm not doubting them, and I think it's going to be a fantastic game of football.
Are you suggesting they might view themselves as underdogs because of the players they've got missing?
No, I'm suggesting they might be viewed as underdogs because they don't carry the same sort of like positive energy right now as say Liverpool do. Like Liverpool's last game was beating Chelsea at home, a Chelsea side who some people fancied to be able to go there and cause an issue, and they did to a certain extent, but there's the win. As opposed to the Arsenal side where they've just lost at Bournemouth, and they had a player out who's a key player for them. Like, I don't think, obviously the gambling industry is whatever it is, but if you were to ask just people in general, I think there'll be more people, I believe, and maybe I'm in my own bubble, who would think that Liverpool have got a really good chance of winning there. Whereas I think if Arsenal were favourites, wouldn't be thinking that way at all. So I think they do enter as a slight underdog, and I think that would probably make them a far more dangerous side.
I mean, they've got suspensions, they've got injuries, haven't they, Dave? They've had more red cards than any other team since the start of the 23 season, I think.
As well, since Arteta's appointment, Arsenal have had 18 players sent off red cards, 4 more than the other side, 8 more than Manchester City, 10 more than Liverpool. But the stats are a little bit naughty in a sense of the first 3 seasons that Arteta was manager, he had 13 red cards. So if we take the 13 off the 18 I mentioned before, they're quite comparable to Liverpool and Manchester City. City have had 2 fewer than them. Liverpool, in fact, have had more than them in that period. And I think the approach, I think, is really interesting. When looking at Manchester City and Arsenal, when they're facing teams with less bodies, there's times when they have more possession, which is absolutely crazy. City have had 3 red cards since Arteta's appointment. In each of those games, they have had more possession. And in one of the games, Joao Cancelo got sent off on the 26th minute against Fulham, and they finished the game with 70% possession, which is crazy. Question for Graham, how do you deal with having a man down, and should you stick with your ideas going into the match, such as we want to dominate the ball, we want to create as many chances as possible, or do you have to adapt?
Well, I think it depends, but mostly I think you have to adapt because the game does change, and I suppose it also depends on when you lose your man. I mean, Arsenal lost the man about 30 minutes, so you have to play a long period of the game with a man down. Interestingly, sometimes you can. I don't think they lost the game because they were down to 10 men. Was my reflection. I think they they had a real big chance with Martinelli before the first goal. And then the first goal, I think, from a corner, and there's a slight, I think, Martinelli again position on the edge of the box. So a couple of little errors there that stopped them, keeping where they are in the game. But yeah, I think all the time the interesting thing with Arsenal, I think, is probably for the first time in a long time, there's a little bit of instability, and from those players that you talked about being out. I think previously you could almost name the starting 11. There's a bit of fluidity. There's a bit of everybody knows each other. Partnerships all over the pitch. Saka, Odegaard, all those sorts of stuff. And now they're having to find those ones again with Sterling, Marino, different relationships. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that, I think.
I mean, that's a fair point, actually, isn't it, Nedum? In that they have lost their most for this get. I mean, injuries depending on whether anybody's fit or not. But Saliba, Odegaard, Saka are not far off their 3 most influential players, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Saliba he was in team of the season last year. You've got Saka, who, is the star of that team, and Odegaard, who was captain, who's, I think, in my opinion, his miss has been the biggest one so far this season because there have been elements where they don't feel as creative. I think some of that is due to the fact that they've lost his influence in there, the way he moves around the field, his vision for a pass, even things like the way he initiates press as well. I think he's key for them. So yes, it's tough, and Graham knows himself. Like, it's not to say that you have a definitive starting 11 in any particular time, but when players start to build relationships with each other, you're less concerned as you watch them play because you know how they're going to be responding to each other. If someone's having a bad day, someone could sort of balance it out on the other side. And when they're playing well together, it's better than having 11 individuals. So yeah, missing those people is massive. I think one thing I've got to say, I've got it's so petty. I've got a gripe with Arteta. He never tells anyone any truth about who's injured on any week-to-week basis. He's such a troll with it. It's ridiculous. I've seen people, maybe Graham's guilty of this as well. But I'm going to represent today the FPL community.
Yeah.
Just be honest, Mikel. Just be honest. You know what I mean? Just tell people. But yeah, I thought Odegaard.
They're not there. They're not there as somebody who doesn't play FPL. They're not there to serve the FPL.
No, but it's not. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. And to be fair, you had the American comparisons before.
Yeah.
Like in America, you have to say who is in and who is out. You have to. So 2 international windows ago, Odegaard comes off for Norway, and initial reports from the Sky are like, "Oh, his ankle ligaments are done. He's in big trouble." Fast forward to the Friday, Arteta gets asked about him, says he's touch and go for the weekend. That was 2 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a personal troll job. But to get back to it, those players are key. We won't see the best version of Arsenal, in my opinion. But this is the value of having depth. And it might not be the perfect way that you want to go and take on a side like Liverpool. But all the players on the field that will be put out by Arteta, who he will believe are good enough to go and affect them, and playing in front of that crowd and understanding the gravity of the game. That this feels to me similar to when they played Arsenal. I think it was back in January or February time last season, and ended up being a huge win for them. And I think from there, they barely dropped any points.
From a Liverpool perspective and from an Arne Slot perspective, Graham, what's impressed you most about him since coming to the Premier League?
Well, I think just the fact that he's following Jurgen Klopp on so many levels would have been a challenge for him. But I think he looks like he's been there a while. I think you've got to give credit to Liverpool as well as a club, because don't forget, we're probably all the so-called experts were talking about them in the window, not signing anybody, players, etc., losing out on players, and it was almost a bit of not a crisis, but it was getting criticism for it. But maybe they just looked at it and thought, actually, our squad is quite good. We're quite stable here. We need a good coach. They've identified that. Arne Slot's record in final was fantastic. He did an amazing job there. So it's obviously really, really competent. They were very confident with who they had. And then they've just allowed him to work in stable conditions. I think that's, as a coach, that's what we all would like. Mikel's now working in unstable conditions because he's got to find solutions for 3 players. Football coaching and management is very easy when your team's winning, everyone's fit, and everyone knows each other, and partnerships are there, so everything's fine. It's when things get unstable is where it's tricky. And I think for Slot, what he's done is he's made it very stable. Playing style has changed bit by bit. They build up a bit more patiently now. They press a bit more patiently now. So I'll be interested to see how they can maintain that.
But the other thing in all that, you talk about that stability. There's a new sporting director as well, and so actually, Nedum, what with Richard Hughes coming from Bournemouth, there probably might have been a feeling of, well, I've got to make my mark somehow. I might need to bring in a player somehow to show that I've arrived, and so on and so forth. And actually, that stability and keeping everything the same. I know they brought in Chiesa and Mamadashvili as well, but to have that stability with a new sporting director and a new head coach is unusual.
Yeah. I think it is, yes. But I also value, as Graham was sort of alluding to there, like a fresh set of eyes to see exactly what's going on. Because I think some of the so-called experts, as we see, they were tired of seeing the same players for Liverpool year in, year out. And as a consequence, they're thinking that they're not good enough. But then when somebody comes in, like when Slot assesses the talent at Liverpool, he's probably assessed that it's the most talent he's ever had in his managerial career. So in terms of things that he needs to change, he probably doesn't feel it's that much, because this is amazing. And these guys can fulfill the idea of, say, how he wants his team to play. And I think in Richard Hughes coming there as well, sometimes you do, I guess, want to have someone that'll bring in that marquee signing and so on, but it has to be right. And I think in the way that they've gone about their business now, with the manager changing after being there for so long, but the new person coming in and feeling similar, yet not the same, I think that's key. And this start to the season has been remarkable. And everyone will say, the real test is to come now with all these big teams that they're playing and so on. But the fact is, they arrive at that test in good form with good belief, and a manager who doesn't seem like he's going to be flustered by anything like that. So more power to them, more power to the new faces. And I say the ability to decide that, like, continuation sometimes is very much a good thing.
The big thing, Dave, is that they needed to sign a new midfielder. But on the evidence of their midfielders so far this season, they're more than fine in that department.
Yeah, you'd say so. I think, we spoke quite a bit about Gravenberch on this podcast already. His performance against Manchester United, sensational. And again, Curtis Jones, another player that might not have quite fit into Jurgen Klopp's system and style, but how good he was against Chelsea. It was ridiculous. Scored, won the penalty. But if you actually look at the stats for Liverpool, he had the most shots, created the most chances, second most dribbles and final third passes, most ball recoveries, most tackles, most interceptions and most blocks. He did absolutely everything. And that is a solution, as we're saying, with stability, already in the club, super talent. He's looking really good.
Who's going to win then, Dave?
I'm going to go with Arsenal. I think Arsenal played Liverpool really well in the 3-1 victory at the Emirates last season. I thought they overloaded the Liverpool press, wide with Kai Havertz drifting out there and the other striker drifting out there. I think that is still a solution to this Liverpool press. Yes, it's slightly changed, but I think the space is behind that first line of pressure. And I don't think anyone's quite tapped into that. And we saw Arsenal do that against PSG. So I'm going to go with an Arsenal win.
Graham?
I'll go draw. Sit on the fence.
Do you know what? We've got to end that. We've got to end that. There's no way a draw is sitting on the fence. It's a possible outcome. Like, how can we say that's sitting on the fence? You know what I mean?
It's sitting on the fence in case you meet Arsenal or Liverpool fans in coming days. I think that's where it's sitting on. It is very much a possible result.
So for the sake of the pod then, since we've had one Arsenal win, one draw, I'll go for Liverpool. But for anyone that wonders why Statman Dave went Arsenal, just remember he's a Man United fan.
Made him know. I've already gave you my reasons. But again, there is quite a few pieces of memorabilia behind me.
Good for you, Dave. Good for you.
Just before we finish, I just want to touch on Brighton, who are doing very well this season. They're in 5th. They play Wolves this weekend. But in particular, just in some insight into Danny Welbeck, who's one of the most informed strikers in the Premier League this season. 5 from 8. You brought him to the club in 2020, Graham. Could you have imagined that 4 years on from that, he would still be leading the line for Brighton?
Well, the challenge when we brought him in, because Danny's quality, if it wasn't for his injuries, he would have played a lot more for England. He would have played a lot higher for a lot longer. We got him at the time. I think he was at Watford. I think he was at Watford in the Championship. So it just goes to show how football works. People have written him off because he injury record, etc., etc. So our challenge was to get him fit and then enjoying his football. And if you get Danny Welbeck fit and enjoying his football, the quality's still there. He's a top player, top person. Credit to the club. They didn't just recognise it's about signing young players. It's about also understanding what older players can do for the environment and for the collective, and to help the younger players, improve. And somebody like Danny, as a role model, how to act, how to be, how to condition himself, how to interact with his teammates is the highest level. I'm delighted for him that he's doing what he's doing. I think he's contributing with goals. He's intelligent. He can drop in. He can threaten the back line. He can do loads of things. So the challenge was, as long as Danny was healthy and fit, then he can carry on playing, because he's got that. He's just got intelligence and a fantastic character.
Is his intelligence his greatest strength then, as a player?
Well, I think sometimes, you look at people and you see what Danny's had to go through. I think he's also a resilient character as well. He can deal. He's a good human being, so he doesn't get carried away too much with the nonsense of football. Plus or minus, a level guy that when sometimes you're trying to educate younger players and younger men how to handle the Premier League and how to handle the stress of the job and the challenge of the position, to have someone that's been there, done it, but as a guy can just handle it well. I think it's priceless as a coach. We talk about tactics and half spaces and all this stuff, which is of course really important, but there's a human side to the game as well, and having people like him is just so valuable.
Nedum, this may be painful for you to have to talk about the Manchester United Academy, and other academies probably have the same philosophy. But back then, and maybe it's still true with the United Academy, I don't know. But back then, the aim was try and produce footballers for Manchester United. And then if you're not going to be good enough to play for Manchester United, you're going to have a successful football career elsewhere. And even if that eventually fails, you're going to be a good human being to be able to succeed elsewhere. And you can actually see all of that in Danny Welbeck, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely you can. And I think you can see that with sort of like other academies now as well. Maybe some of the more successful recent ones have tried to do a similar thing. And I was actually speaking with somebody recently, and when City's academy first moved to, say, the new training ground, they were talking in a meeting that, they want to create good players and good people. And the guy that was there at the time said, yeah, it sounded like one of those things that sounds great in a meeting. But all of a sudden, that's kind of what they've created along that road. And I think what Graham's saying is perfectly fair about Danny, because like I played with him as well when he was a young kid. Well, not a young kid, but when he was younger at Sunderland, and he was brilliant. That intelligence, the emotional side of things as well. Like, he was a great character before even the injuries were starting to sort of slow him down and make him think about football in a different way. And I got a chance to see the best of his like physical abilities as well as his desire as well. He's a brilliant person, and that whole thing about how United tried to do things back in the day, I think it's a model which other teams have tried to follow. And there are some good people within the world of football now, coming from some very significant academies who, in my opinion, have the right idea.
What do the numbers say, Dave?
Danny Welbeck is in his renaissance. He's in a brilliant spot. He's got 5 in 8, as you mentioned, which is the same as he managed last season, 5 in 29. And he's joined the 100 club of 100 goals plus assists in the Premier League. So, great numbers. And I think he's a real good focal point for this fast Brighton attack at the moment.
Would you have him back?
Danny Welbeck?
Yeah.
In absolute heartbeat. As Graham says, literally everything Graham just said then about the mentality, the role model, so important. It'd be great at Manchester United. So yes, I do miss him.
I should be Danny's agent now for that.
And just one on Brighton, Graham. I mean, they are good fun to watch, aren't they? I mean, they've been good fun to watch for a while, but they are really good fun to watch.
Yeah, I was impressed with the result against Newcastle, because that's not easy. I think the performance-wise, that they were maybe a little bit fortunate, but I think they got it because they defended really well. And obviously Danny comes up with a fantastic goal. But against Tottenham, they were really good. Second half, amazing, attack fast. They've got a nice balance. They've still got a lot of the concepts that Roberto De Zerbi had in terms of their possession and their build-up. But the new coach has come in with his ideas, which is, I think, about being more compact, smaller distances between the players. So defensively, they look good. I think they've had to adjust with the high line at the start of the season. They've adjusted that. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to follow. I think Tony Bloom would have seen this season as a chance for them to really challenge those European spots, because I think that's why he's invested the money that he did in the summer.
They should be a good bet, shouldn't they, Nedum, for a European spot? Oh.
Yes,
well, on current
absolutely.
After 8 games, on current evidence, are there 7 teams better than them in the Premier League at the moment?
Not at the moment, but the key word is at the moment. And I think as you look at sides who can get better, I think Dave will want to remind us that United can get better, and as a consequence, they'll be up there as well. You're looking at Chelsea behind them, Spurs, Newcastle. Can they get better? Of course. And yeah, even maybe this is the year of Nottingham Forest as well. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Forest back in Europe. But for now, they're great to watch, and hopefully that stays the same with good health and good management.
And obviously, you are a football manager, a football head coach, as we discovered right at the start, and you have Brighton connections. But are you like any of the rest of us sometimes who watch Brighton and somebody starts for them, and you think, where the hell have they got him from?
No, because I've had experience of working at the club, so I know how it is. It doesn't just happen by accident. They're not just picking some guy from South America and dumping him onto the Premier League. There's a smart way of doing it. There's a pathway. There's a strategy around helping them adapt, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, they've over a period of time now, it's been a real success story. I think they do what probably most clubs don't want to do, or fans don't want to do, which is they sell players to improve. It's the hardest thing in football to do.
Mitoma's a player that's been really good this season, Graham. What was it like managing him in terms of his profile, how he worked against certain opposition?
Well, he just arrived when we in the last season when we were there. So you can see already his 1v1 attributes were amazing. He's a really hard worker, great sort of person, quiet lad off the pitch. But it was just a case of him adapting to the Premier League. You could see how good he was in training. His best actions were just so high end. Probably the bit that he needs to add, I would say, is probably goals from that position to take him to be a real top player. That's the next stage for him. But in terms of getting the ball to him, giving you a pattern of play, saying, okay, there's our high width, there's our clear width. We've got a threat there. It forces opponents to now defend the middle of the pitch, or if you put too many bodies wide with him, you've got numbers sort of lesser in the middle. So there's a real with Mint to the other side as well. They've done well in terms of recruiting both those guys.
Did you read Matoma's dissertation on dribbling?
I didn't know.
All
No,
right.
I didn't miss that one.
Well, that's what he did when he was in Japan. He decided he wasn't quite ready for professional football, so he went to university and he did his dissertation or his thesis on the art of dribbling. And then when he'd finished university, then he felt he was ready for professional football. Did you know that, Dave?
Yeah, that's a really nice thing. He speaks a lot about like looking at the opponent and basically putting them off balance and then going. So no, super interesting.
If you had to do a dissertation on your skill set, Nedum, what would it?
I was wondering what the line's going to be before we finish. I think on this podcast, just Statman Dave put downs. I think that'd be a master of that. That'd definitely be a first.
Look, as someone that's played with Nedum, I would say something along the lines of his awareness on the ball from a defensive sense is perfect. Communication is very, very good as well. Maybe your communication, Nedum. That could be it.
No, listen, it sounds good because it's by comparison. When you're on the field of people that say nothing, mate, you sound like the leader of men. In pro football, mate, that's as standard as it comes.
You can get in touch with us. Maybe ideas for Nedum's dissertation. +44 330 678 1078. You can send us a voice note as well. The email is planetpremierleague@bbc.co.uk. Thank you very much, Graham. Been a joy having you with us. You're welcome back, and I'm sure you're even more desperate to get back into football after an hour with us. But if not, and you want to come back, you are welcome anytime. We'll be back next week. A reminder, you can listen to this podcast on BBC Sounds as well as on your favourite podcast provider. So subscribe and download and send us those thoughts and questions. This has been an IMG production for BBC Sounds.